Hello again. I'm going to read the second part of chapter 1, and then homework tonight is to finish and also get through chapter 2. We are right here at the section break. And in the first section, we hear about Jem and breaking his arm, and they kind of get into an argument over what started it, Scout and Jem. Now, keep in mind, the whole book is basically about how Jem broke his arm. All 300 something pages of it. So enjoy. In this section, we get more into the setting of the story. So it's still older Scout, adult Scout, kind of telling the story of young Scout. We're in young Scout's time now. Maycomb was an old town, but it was a tired old town when I first knew it. In rainy weather, the streets turned to red slop, grass grew on the sidewalks, the courthouse sagged in the square. Somehow it was hotter then. A black dog suffered on a summer's day. Bony mules hitched to hover carts flicked flies in the sweltering shade of the live oaks on the square. Men's stiff collars wilted by 9 in the morning. Ladies bathed before noon, after their 3 o'clock naps, and by nightfall were like soft tea cakes with frostings of sweat and sweet talcum. So just to understand that line, they didn't really have deodorant, but they had the main ingredient of deodorant, which was talcum powder. And it was not ladylike to sweat. So they would take this powder and powder their faces with it to keep from sweating. But too much, it's like baby powder. Too much baby powder ends up turning you white. And by the evening, these ladies have put on so much powder that they ended up looking like cupcakes with this giant thing of frosting. So she's definitely making fun of those old ladies. People moved slowly then. They ambled across the square, shuffled in and out of the stores around it, took their time about everything. A day was 24 hours long, but seemed longer. There was no hurry, for there was nowhere to go, nothing to buy, and no money to buy it with, nothing to see outside the boundaries of Maycomb County. Remember, this is during Great Depression. Nobody had money. But it was a time of vague optimism for some of the people. Maycomb County had recently been told it had nothing to fear but fear itself. That is from President Roosevelt. It's kind of just marking this is the beginning of the 1930s, kind of to give you a feel for the time. We lived on the main residential street in town. Atticus, Gemini, plus Calpurnia, our cook. She's kind of their servant, sort of nanny, but she doesn't do much. She's not devoted all her time to them. She's also a cook and cleans. She is black, and it was very traditional in these times to have a black servant. Jem and I found our father satisfactory. He played with us, read to us, and treated us with courteous detachment. So he's not all up in their business. He's kind of like, hey, you do your thing, I'll do mine. Calpurnia was something else again. She was all angles and bones. She was nearsighted. She squinted. Her hand was as wide as a bed slat and twice as hard. She's probably referring to the fact that she spanked Scout a lot. And here we get Scout's point of view, and not really Calpurnia's. Like, she paints Calpurnia as this like evil, terrible person, and then if you look at the things she does that are so bad, there's nothing really wrong with them at all. She was always ordering me out of the kitchen, asking me why I couldn't behave as well as Jem when she knew he was older, and calling me home when I wasn't ready to come home. Our battles were epic and one-sided. Calpurnia always won, mainly because Atticus always took her side. She had been with us ever since Jem was born, and I felt her tyrannical presence for as long as I could remember. Our mother died when I was 2, so I never felt her absence. She was a Graham from Montgomery. Atticus met her when he was first elected to the state legislature. He was middle-aged then. She was 15 years his junior. Jem was the product of the first year of their marriage. 4 years later I was born, and 2 years later our mother died from a sudden heart attack. They said it ran in her family. I did not miss her, but I think Jem did. He remembered her clearly, and sometimes in the middle of the game he would sigh at length, and then go off and play by himself behind the car house. When he was like that, I knew better than to bother him. So Scout is very much growing up without a mother, really, and she doesn't really find any problem with that. Like, she's cool with it. She never knew her mom, so she doesn't have to miss her. When I was almost 6 and Jem was nearly 10, our summertime boundaries, within calling distance of Calpurnia, were Mrs. Henry Lafayette de Bose's house, 2 doors to the north of us, and the Radley place, 3 doors to the south. We were never tempted to break them. The Radley house was inhabited by an unknown entity, the mere description of whom was enough to make us behave for days. Mrs. de Bose was plain hell. So here we've kind of got the neighborhood boundaries. The Radley place, that's kind of like the house with the house in your neighborhood where someone is kind of shut in. You never really see them. They never come out. It's always a little bit scary. They don't take care of their yard. And then many of us have a neighbor who, hates us, and we kind of hate that person. And so that's Mrs. de Bose for them. That was the summer Dill came to us. Early one morning, as we were beginning our day's work and play in the backyard, Jem and I heard something next door in Rachel Haverford's collared patch. We went to the wire fence to see if there was a puppy Miss Rachel's rat terrier was expecting. Instead, we found someone looking at us. Sitting down, he wasn't much higher than the collards. We stared at him until he spoke. "Hey! Hi yourself," said Jem pleasantly. "I'm Charles Baker Harris, and I can read." "So what?" "I just thought you'd like to know I can read. You got anything that needs reading? I can do it." "How old are you?" 4 and a half. "Going on 7. "Shoot, no wonder then," said Jem, jerking his thumb at me. "Scout yonder's been reading ever since she was born, and she ain't even started to school yet. You look right puny for going on 7. "I'm little, but I'm old." Jem brushed his hair back to get a better look. "Why don't you come over, Charles Baker Harris?" "Lord, what a name!" "It's no funnier than yours. Aunt Rachel says that yours is Jeremy Atticus Finch." Jem scowled. "I'm big enough to fit mine. Your name's longer than you are. Bet it's a foot longer." "Folks call me Dill," said Dill, struggling under the fence. "Do better if you go over it instead of under it. Where'd you come from?" This is another example of kids, and probably one of my favorite things about kids. You can two kids can walk up to each other, introduce each other, "My name's so-and-so." "Well, my name's so-and-so." And then all of a sudden they are best friends for like an hour, and then they never see each other again. So this is what I love about kids. You can just introduce yourself and be their best friend. Dill was from Meridian, Mississippi, was spending the summer with his aunt, Miss Rachel, and would be spending every summer in Maycomb from now on. His family was Maycomb County originally. His mother worked for a photographer in Meridian and had entered his picture in a beautiful child contest and won $5. She gave the money to Dill, who went to the picture show or the movies 20 times on it. "Don't have any picture shows here except the Jesus ones in the courthouse sometimes. Ever see anything good?" said Jem. Dill had seen Dracula, a revelation that moved Jem to eye him with the beginning of respect. "Tell it to us." Dill was a curiosity. He wore blue linen shorts that buttoned to his shirt. His hair was snow white and stuck to his head like duck fluff. He was a year my senior, but I towered over him. As he told us the tale, his blue eyes would lighten and darken. His laugh was sudden and happy. He habitually pulled at a cowlick in the center of his forehead. When Dill reduced Dracula to dust, and Jem said the show sounded better than the book, I asked Dill where his father was. "You ain't said anything about him." "I haven't got one." "Is he dead?" "No." "Then if he's not dead, you got one, haven't you?" Dill blushed, and Jem told me to blush, a sure sign that Dill had been studied and found acceptable. So here we got another example of kids thinking they know everything and they don't. So Scout's telling Dill, "Well, you have a dad. I mean, if he's not dead, you got one." And I think we can probably guess that Dill, his dad left them, or maybe never even knew Dill was born. And so the fact that Dill is blushing, it's something that he feels very acutely and is going to feel acutely throughout the story. And of course, Scout, because she's a silly 5-year-old, has no idea that she just said something that is very embarrassing to him. And meanwhile, we got Jem going, "Shh, shh, shut up, just shut up, Scout." I got in trouble for that all the time, so I can totally relate. Thereafter, the summer passed in routine contentment. Routine contentment was improving our treehouse, that rested between two giant chinaberry trees in the backyard, fussin', running through our list of dramas based on the works of Oliver Optic, Victor Appleton, and Edgar Rice Burroughs. In this matter we were lucky to have Dill. He played the character parts firmly thrust upon me, the ape in Tarzan, Mr. Crabtree in the Rover Boys, Mr. Damon in Tom Swift. Thus we came to know Dill as a pocket Merlin, whose head teemed with eccentric plans, strange longings, and quaint fancies. By the end of August our repertoire was vapid from countless reproductions, and it was then that Dill gave us the idea of making Boo Radley come out. So here I'm going to leave you. She starts to describe the Boo Radley place, which is very scary, and Boo Radley is the shut-in who lives there. She's going to tell his backstory, and Dill is completely obsessed with Boo Radley. It's like a real-life, ghost or phantom or mass murderer psychopath. So this completely inspires Dill and gets them, Jem and Scout, to do things they normally wouldn't do. And this is basically the premise of the first half of the novel, their relationship to Boo Radley and like sneaking in and all this stuff. In chapter 2, Scout starts school for the first time, and I'm sure there are a few things that she says about school that I'm sure you can relate to. The fact that she says them in the first grade is especially hilarious. I would pay attention a little bit to Walter Cunningham and Miss Caroline. So thank you very much. Please continue reading chapters 1 and 2.